Hi, I'm Alicia.
And I'm Robin, and you're listening to Bowel Moments,
the podcast sharing real talk about the realities of IBD. Served on the rocks. This week, we talked to Lori Plung. Lori has been living with Crohn's disease for more than 40 years, and we talked to her about what that's been like and all of the advances that she's seen in those 40 years. We talked to her about living with short gut syndrome and utilizing TPN for her nutrition. And we talked to her about running a support group and doing peer-to-peer support and the importance of community. Cheers.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bowel Moments. This is Robin.
Hello, guys. This is Alicia, and I could not be more excited to have our guest on tonight. Our guest is Lori Plung, and Lori, you are, I think, a celebrity in the IBD community, and so I'm really, really excited to have you on the show. So welcome.
Thank you. I don't know about being a celebrity, but I am very happy to be here. Thank you.
100% you're a celebrity. Don't even try to play it down.
I think so. But as we ask all of our celebrity guests and, well, everybody else too, what are you drinking?
What am I drinking? So I am drinking Awake tea out of my amazing mug that my daughter got me from my last surgery, which was just about 5 months ago as I was recovering. And she saw it in the gift shop and it says, "One kick-ass mom." So, and I'm drinking Awake tea because it's like my pacifier. I start in the morning and I drink it all the way till I go to bed. So here it is.
That's fair.
I love that cup, that mug.
Yeah. I'm surprised you don't have one, Robin. That feels like something your daughters would get you.
I feel like I need it. I feel like I need to screenshot it or send it to my children. Why didn't you get me this for Mother's Day?
I love it.
Robin, what about you?
I'm going to tell you a story.
Okay.
After I got home from Scotland, I missed having an electric tea kettle that heated the water so fast. Every rental that we had in Scotland had one of those electric tea kettles, and I just got one. So I made myself some green tea and added some Key West lemon to it. So I'm drinking green tea with lemon.
Lovely. And yes, I have an electric water kettle and I'm a big fan, although I could just probably put it in the microwave, but this feels fancier. I like to feel fancy. It feels
fancier. My kettle lights up. It like starts at blue and then it moves to green and then it moves to purple and then it moves to red when the water's boiling. Oh. I didn't know it did that when I bought it, but then when I turned it on and it did it, it made me so happy. I use it every day.
Well, mine is much more basic than that. So now I'm kind of bummed, but maybe when this one dies.
Happy accident. Happy accident.
Ask you which one it is when mine dies. Well, I am drinking an Aperol Spritz. Look at how pretty that is.
That is very pretty.
Yes. Yeah, I had one. I've ordered one very randomly recently. I don't remember where we were. And because I'd never had one. So I was like, sure, I'll try something new. And then I was like, this is actually really tasty and very summery and refreshing. So I went out specially and got these things for the show tonight. Well, anyway, cheers, guys. Again, super excited to have you on, Lori.
Cheers. Thank you for having me.
Lori, next question for you is, what's your IBD story? How did you join this community?
Yes. So I was diagnosed with Crohn's colitis actually when I was 16 back in 1980. It was controlled for a good 2 years with the one of two drugs that they had all the way back then, sulfasalazine. And I was doing well, junior in high school, feeling great. I graduated. And when I was 18, it came back with a vengeance, fistulizing disease. It was horrible. The cramps, the diarrhea, the no appetite, the weight loss, in and out of the hospital. I was finally admitted for a good 6 to 8 weeks, and they were able to dry up the fistulas, which I was so very lucky. And I was put on bowel rest and on TPN. And TPN is total peripheral nutrition. It's given through a big vein, one of the big veins in your body, either through the neck or the chest. It could be known as a PICC line in the arm. And that's how I received all my nutrition, and it let my bowels rest. and it made me feel better, but it was still a very big struggle. The disease progressed to the point that 6 years later, at 24, I had a total proctocolectomy with a permanent ileostomy, which means my entire colon and rectum was removed. My anus was sewn up in what we now call a Barbie butt. And I also had my terminal ileum removed at the time, and I was told I was disease free. So, hey, I'll take it. And as much as I fought not wanting to have an ostomy because, who wants an ostomy? It saved my life. It ended up being a pretty much of an emergency situation. I was told that my colon was crumbling in the surgeon's hands as he was removing it. So I guess I was steps away from perforation, and I'm so grateful 35 years later, and I'm grateful every day for my ostomy. With that all being said, it was a really hard recovery. That was my first surgery of 6 surgeries. It sounds silly, but I really believe that I was too sick to have such major surgery. I coded the night after surgery. They think maybe it was an electrolyte imbalance or Demerol played a part. I kept complaining that I had like this funny feeling in my chest. And I kept saying to my mother, something doesn't feel right. And the nurses were like, oh, you're fine. It's probably some heartburn or whatever. And sure enough, I coded like half hour later. It was very, very traumatic. I woke up and there were things all over the place and it was crazy. And after I recovered in the hospital and was sent home to recover, I then broke 2 vertebrae and back to the hospital. And that was because of all of the steroids that they had given me to try to get me better. And I was severely osteoporotic at, this young age. So back to the hospital for my back. And I finally recovered. And I was well on my way. I lived in Dallas at the time. My boyfriend lived in Pittsburgh. So visits back and forth. And within a year after my colectomy, my Crohn's came back with a vengeance. And now I was introduced to stricturing disease. I was having strictures like crazy, constant obstructions, which of course are no fun. I will say I have a bit of PTSD, post-traumatic stress, around all of this from the coding and all the medical procedures and in and out of the hospitals and the constant obstructing. So, I'm glad there's a term for it and a name for it so that, I can be helped, and I am. So in total, I've had 6 major abdominal surgeries. I would get a good 4 to 7 years in between each surgery where I'd feel really good. I could eat anything and even popcorn, which was so exciting, and salad and all those good things. And then slowly I'd get sick again. And each surgery consisted of resections and strictureplasties and lysis of adhesions, because we know that we form adhesions after each surgery. It's just scar tissue. We can't help it. My last surgery, as my gallbladder came out, I always try to pick my surgeon wisely, because we know that we want to preserve as much gut as possible so that we can avoid short bowel syndrome. And unfortunately, after my 5th surgery, that tipped me over to short gut. So I've been TP independent for the last, close to 9 years already. And it's not so bad. It's really not so bad. It gives me, the hydration I need, my electrolytes, my calories, and I infuse overnight and I feel great in the morning. So, that's an abridged version of my story.
So you had fistulizing disease and then it changed, then it developed into stricturing. So you had both. Do you know if that's common? I haven't heard of that, having fistulizing and stricturing.
Yeah, so I think there are certain phenotypes of Crohn's that are really bad. I shouldn't say bad, but that are complicated, might be a better word. And people that have fistulas and that have strictures tend to have a worse case of the disease. And I just never developed strictures early on. No, I didn't because I wasn't, I mean, I might have not known it, right? Because the colon was so bad. But I guess once the colon came out and it was only the small bowel, then it was very evident that I was starting to stricture. And only now do I call it stricturing disease and fistulizing disease, because that's what the terminology is now. It wasn't back then.
Right. There
Um,
wasn't terminology for it back then.
That's right. That's
Right.
right.
I am in your boat too. When the surgeon removed my colon, he said it was disintegrating in his hand. He was worried about me going septic because it was basically just falling apart as he was trying to remove it from my body. So
Yeah. Weren't we so sick, right? We were so sick. Yeah.
I have so many questions for you, but I'm going to start out with having an ostomy for 35 years. That's a long time. Have you had to have it moved? Like, can you have one ostomy in one place for your whole life, or is it something that eventually like they have to redo it?
I'm glad you asked that. So with each surgery that I had, I ended up having revisions of the stoma. So you really have a stoma, right? So the ostomy is the opening in the abdomen and the stoma comes out. And the stoma is the actual intestine. So I've been very, very lucky to be with each stoma revision, with each surgery, except for the last one, for it to be in the same place. They didn't have to move it. There was my fifth surgery, where there was the possibility of them giving me a second stoma because they were going to rest my bowel or something, which I wasn't too thrilled about. But if I had to have had it, then I would have had to have it. So then there's, of course, two stomas. But I have one stoma, it's in the same place. And I'm very grateful because that's kind of what I'm used to. And I don't love change. So I'm grateful for that.
I think it's funny that you don't love change, and yet your Crohn's disease is like, oh, I will show you what change is.
That's right.
It's not making it easy for you, unfortunately. The other thing is, I want to talk a little bit more about short gut. So can you tell people a little bit more about what exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So we're born with a lot of intestine and a lot of small bowel. And I believe the cutoff, not a doctor, but I believe the cutoff is less than 150, I think, or 125, somewhere in there, centimeters. So once you go below that, then you're considered short gut. And all of our absorption takes place in our small bowel. So if you don't have the optimal amount of small bowel, you're not going to absorb all the nutrients that your body needs to keep working. So that's basically what short gut is. I myself have 70 centimeters left. That's it. I know. I was a little shocked too after the last surgery when he actually measured it. Not all surgeons measure when they do surgery, from what I've learned. So anybody out there, if you're going to have surgery, make sure your surgeon measures. It's important.
Wow. Okay. So short gut is something that hopefully they will have measured, and they'll be able to say like, hey, we really need to be vigilant about this because you're getting close to that cutoff. And also it means that automatically they're like, you are not going to absorb what you need from what you're eating and drinking. Does that sound correct?
Now,
Okay.
yeah, with that being said, I think there's an adjustment that goes on, that happens in the gut. So after my fifth surgery, when I was officially short gut, I was able to reduce the amount of TPN that I needed calorie wise, because I still eat and my body was adjusting and my bowel was absorbing. I mean, even with 70 centimeters left, my bowel is absorbing because my doctor has started cutting me down calories and the amount of hydration, in the TPN. And I'm holding my weight. I even gained a pound last week, which was like such a celebration, so your gut adjusts. It probably won't adjust enough for me to come off of TPN. There is a medication on the market right now for people with short gut that people have been able to come off of TPN. There's a few side effects, but one of the side effects is if you have an existing stricture, that it can cause an obstruction because it helps to grow the surface area of the small bowel. And it can, get too close together and you can have obstructive symptoms. So that medication did not work for me back then. Maybe it'll work for me now. We're not sure. We have to wait a couple of years to let my bowel readjust.
Wow, science is crazy. I mean, think
It's
about they
crazy.
made a medication that makes your small bowel act like a big bowel.
That's right.
And
And
your small intestines are that's an amazing organ because
really
I lived
is.
without my large intestines. I had it removed, 23 years ago now. And so like my
Yeah.
small intestines had to adapt and adjust and become a completely different organ. Almost, it seems like, so your small intestines are like it's
Yeah.
amazing to me.
And also, there are surgeries where the small intestines could be made into a pouch, right? The J pouch, right? Where that kind of serves as a reservoir, right? And an ostomy can be reversed, right? You could be hooked back up to, to the rectum and evacuate through the anus. I wasn't a candidate for that because, first of all, I had Crohn's. That's mostly used for ulcerative colitis. I think maybe some Crohn's patients here and there. You? Yeah. There we
Sometimes
go.
when they're not diagnosed correctly.
Right. That too. But that also comes with, with challenges, nothing's easy.
Well, and I just think about like all the research they're finding that like how much serotonin and things like that related to your like that brain gut connection is connected to this area. And so I'm like, it's just one of these where I'm like, I'm absolutely fascinated by this now. I'm gonna fall down a rabbit hole. This is what's gonna happen is I'm going to suddenly just be reading a lot of articles about your small intestine, and this is a question that you may not have any idea of, and you don't need to answer, but was it ever discussed with you to get a transplant?
Yeah, so that's a really great question.
Thank
So my last surgeon who did my surgery is a small bowel transplant surgeon. I am not a candidate right now. I'm hoping never to be a candidate, but if I am, then I'm at the right place with the right surgeon. This is all he does is small bowel complicated surgeries, which is why I've used him because I'm super complicated and I didn't want to lose any more bowel. But they do small bowel transplants. It's super complicated. And it was explained to me a lot of the times when people are TPN dependent and they lose access to where they can put the catheters for the TPN, then sometimes you're led down the road to a transplant. I am very, very lucky that, and I hope I'm not jinxing myself, knocking on a little wood here, that I've had the same line in for about 7 years or so, maybe 6 years. I mean, it had to be changed once, but it's basically in the same spot for a really long time. And
That's
I
amazing.
think, yeah, and I think part of that is due to the protocol that my doctor gave me to scrub the hub. They call it scrubbing the hub. So when I hook into my IVs every night, the end of the part of the catheter, I have to scrub to make sure that it's sterile before I hook it up. And he has a procedure that he taught me, and it really keeps it clean. You scrub it for 30 seconds, it dries for a minute. You scrub it for another 30 seconds, it dries for another minute. And then I like to do things in 3. So I scrub it one more time and then I flush and I hook in. And it's been working. And I'm also very, very careful. I have a nurse that comes once a week and she changes my dressing. There are a lot of patients who change their own dressing. I don't trust myself. So I'm not one of those patients. I like eyes on also. And when I shower, I use something called AquaGuard. And it's like these plastic things that I put over the dressing. And, I take my showers a little differently. I don't stand under the shower to wash my hair with my head back. I tilt it over. So I just do things to kind of try to keep the area, not pounded with water because you don't want to get it wet. So I'm very careful with it. And so far, so good.
Definitely knock on wood on that one. Cause yeah, that is a long time to have your port in the same place. But that's remarkable. And everybody take note of your protocol because it seems like that's a really good one. So I am very curious because one of the things that I know about you is that you have a really long-standing successful support group that's very much in coordination with UPMC, where you go to get your medical care. So University of Pennsylvania Medical Center. You also are just very integrated into the clinic as a patient contact that they get people in touch with when they have somebody who's maybe newly diagnosed or struggling in any way. Basically, you're another provider in this hospital. And so I want you to talk about how did you get that established? Like, what was your first step in the door with them? And how have you managed to get yourself so integrated in? Because I think it's such a remarkable thing for them to do, to have you this integrated in, because it really helps the providers. And also is super important to the patient. So talk a little bit about how you do get this involved at UPMC.
The UPMC is here in Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. I do receive my care there, and I am so, so grateful. So an opportunity presented itself to start a support group. Part of their IBD center was a clinic where you can go for mental health support. And there was a group in there that was set up for learning skills to how to accept and deal with your illness and whatever it was. And through that, it wasn't a support group. It was, just a group to learn skills. And an opportunity presented itself where that model was changing, and that was no longer going to be available. And the local chapter of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation here in Pittsburgh had been after me to start a support group. The timing wasn't good. My kids were growing up, and I just didn't have the time to allocate to it. And the two things just kind of meshed together at the right place at the right time. So I offered to start a support group for the UPMC IBD Center in partnership with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. And that's basically how everything started. And to back up, I have a dear friend who works in the IBD center. She is involved with educational programming, and she just is the heart of that center. And I knew her from starting the local chapter here at the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. She was one of our first executive directors. So I had that relationship. So she helped me get the support group off the ground and connected with the doctors. And that's basically part of how it started. To back up a little bit before that, part of the model, there was something called IBD Connect within the IBD Center, where there were two women who were phenomenal nurses, and they helped patients that were inpatient connect them with volunteers who had a similar disease process and help to peer-to-peer support. So I was one of those people that talked to other patients. And to be quite honest, through my entire IBD journey, from the time I was a teenager to now, I was always the one talking to patients, because everybody knew Lori had Crohn's. Will you talk to this one? Will you talk to that one? So it was very natural for me. So this opportunity presents itself. I start the support group, and it was like 6 months before COVID hit. So I had one in the daytime for the people that didn't work, and then I had one at nighttime for the people that worked. And UPMC gave me the space, and it was great. And yeah, the doctors would refer patients that, were asking for support, or they thought they needed support. The nurses would refer. And I think what is so great is because it's peer-to-peer, and it's all voluntary. I give my time, and it's my pleasure to. But what's so great is that, I have guest speakers, and I can, the doctors quite often, or the dietitians, or whoever it is, they'll come and be a guest speaker. Or if something comes up in the support group and I have a medical question, because clearly we're not doctors, right? I mean, might play one on TV, but I'm not a doctor. So, I have resources that I can go to, and it has become a wonderful, wonderful partnership that I'm able to provide the psychosocial support as another peer for their patients. And it's incredible. And they're all amazing, every single one of them. So yeah, it's a great experience.
As a support group facilitator, what is the magic that makes your support group work? What is the thing that you found that sort of sparks the conversation, gets people coming back?
Yeah, so I have a way that I run the group, and it's the same every we meet twice a month. So I start with a mindfulness meditation exercise that I use an app for, so it just chills everybody out. And we do introductions, and we do an icebreaker question. So it just kind of lightens everything. It's patients only, right? Because this is important. It's patients only. And it's from, I would say, people maybe in their 20s all the way up to like close to 80. So we have a nice span and everything in between. And I make it very well known at the very beginning, as people want to join the group, is that it's a very welcoming, supportive, non-judgmental environment. So it's like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in the support group stays in the support group. So people feel comfortable opening up. And we're just very, very lucky that the members are all the core group that comes every time are very, educated in their disease, very supportive, and it just creates an excellent environment. And I don't pose one question for discussion. I give everybody a chance to check in and ask a question or just check in how they've been. Sometimes it's not even about IBD. Sometimes it's just about the crazy week they had at work, and how exhausted they were. And, how does that play into their IBD or whatever it is? But it's just conversation and everybody's comfortable, and we have newbies, we have people that have had it forever, and it's just a great environment and everybody's comfortable to speak and really is well supported.
Or especially to get people to return, it's like this is the way it always is, so it's kind of nice to establish that this is just what the expectations are every single time. I think that does help people feel comfortable. When you're going into sort of an uncomfortable situation. I mean, people share a lot of personal details and sometimes go really deep, and sometimes that can be intimidating for people. So I think that's really wonderful.
Yeah. And, we had a group last night and we had one member who has come a few times, but she's newer, and she opened up last night, and it was just so heartwarming. After it was over, I felt this is great. This is what it's about. This particular patient needed so much support, and she really found it. Actually, 2 of them last night. It was wonderful. So yeah, I just think the environment just lends itself. And I think it's also that I give everybody a chance to speak and speak to one another, right? So everybody's sharing their experiences, which helps the others not to feel alone, right? And that, oh, well, you experienced it too, so it's going to be okay because I see you're doing well. So it's that type of thing. So I think that adds to the success.
I like that you have people that have been through stuff that are still coming back to the group to be able to provide that level of support to other people. I think a lot of people struggle with wanting to go back to a group because it sort of represents a time when maybe they weren't doing very well. And now they just want to go out and live their life because they're feeling so much better. But you sort of miss out on being a resource to other people and being able to share your wisdom, because sometimes these are hard fought battles, and what you learned could be really useful to other people. But I also get that you just want to go out and live your life.
Yeah.
Is your group still meeting virtually?
Yes. So we are meeting virtually, and it's really interesting. Coming out of the pandemic, I think we're going to stay virtual for now. Definitely the evening one. Well, they're both evenings for now. And I now have members that are from all over the country, right? So
that's what I was going to ask you. Going virtual, did it bring people from other areas?
It did. So I have one who did her PhD actually here at Pitt and moved down to teach in Tennessee. So she is a very big core member and she still joins. And then I have somebody from the Baltimore area and from the outskirts of Pittsburgh, where it would be too far to travel in person. And the other part that I think is really important, and this is why I will absolutely keep it virtual, at least one of them, is, think about the disease that we're talking about and who's suffering, right? There could be days that some of these members can't leave their house. They need their bathroom, right? So all they have to do is turn their camera off and do their thing and come back. I've had members taking the call from bed, right? Just laying in bed and putting their laptop on their bellies. So, if you think about the population that is being served, virtual is just really helpful for this population.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it does allow some of those folks that you said are really struggling to still be part of it. And actually, that's probably the time they need the group the most is, when you're stuck at home and you're super isolated, that's the perfect time. So this is a good thing that came out of the pandemic, is that people are just, I think, more willing and accepting accepting of this type of support and education as well. In the times that you've brought in speakers, did you ever have a speaker that you were surprised that people really responded to, or a speaker that you were surprised that people responded to not favorably?
It's interesting. So I handle the speakers by asking the group what they want to learn about or the type of speaker that they want. And I, a while ago, sent out a survey and put all different types of speakers, and everybody rated it. And that's pretty much how I have done it. And the speaker will usually present a little bit and then we'll go into a conversation. And that's basically how we've done it. And I don't think there's been one speaker that anybody did not like. I really don't. I'm trying to think back. We've actually had one that was a repeat because they loved her so much. And it was actually a psychologist who specializes in self-compassion. And she was tremendous. So I had her back. They requested her to come back again, and she was so thrilled to do so. It was great. I also had Dr. Tiffany Taft on talking about, the medical PTSD in her study, and she was phenomenal. I've had our doctors, when the pandemic hit, I had one of the doctors come on right away. He was happy to come on and talked about, everybody was so nervous and scared. It was right at the beginning when we went into lockdown. Nobody knew anything and everybody was petrified. So we had one of the doctors come on and spoke to us. And yeah, guest speakers are great. In fact, that reminds me, I have to organize another guest speaker. But I've had two IBD dietitians, one who works right here at UPMC, Teresia, who I just adore. She's so amazing. She has come on, and I've had Kelly from Cedars-Sinai come on as well. And so amazing. And again, because it's virtual, I can have people from Chicago, like, Tiffany, and, from California. It's amazing.
A lot of people don't like to go to support groups just because the phrase support group has negative connotations, right? Because people think of it, they go there, they say their name, they say what's wrong with them, or they listen to a whole bunch of other people do that. So how do you combat that stigma around support groups?
I think that's a really good question. So, there are people that float in and out, right? As we talked about before, who come when they need it and then do their thing because they're well. And to me, that's the biggest compliment, right? That they got the support they needed, they're feeling better, and off they go. Then, of course, we have our core members who, even though they are veterans and they help to support others, they're still receiving the support because that's how they do best, even though they're feeling well and they might be in remission, but there's still upkeep as a chronic illness, right? So they offer support and they receive support. I believe that because of the way that I run the group, that we try to normalize it, right? We try to normalize what's going on, and that peer-to-peer support is empowering, and it's nothing to be ashamed of needing support, right? You are empowering yourself to deal with what you have to deal with by surrounding yourself with others who really get it. And also, knowledge is power, right? So not only are patients receiving support, but they're also learning. They're learning about their disease through conversation, and I work really hard at making everybody feel comfortable and following up with these patients after the group and giving them resources if needed, or connecting them with whatever conversation we had. I always try to follow up with the patients that I say, let me look into this for you and get back to you about it. And I think because it's such a welcoming group and I work hard to make everybody feel comfortable and welcomed and heard and validated, that they come back. So I guess that's what it is. It makes me feel good to be able to give back and share my own experience of, 43 years, I guess, of this disease. I like to say it's from teens to menopause because I'm pushing 60, right? And that, it's like almost like, maybe that's a good book, Teens to Menopause. I don't know. But but it is. So anybody that comes in from their 20s, up until, I have people older than me in the group, so they can share the same wisdom, right? Because they've lived with it for a long time. But I've been through every life cycle thing, I got married, I got married with an ostomy, right? I had 2 babies with an ostomy. I had some fertility problems. I've had surgery with little kids. I've done it all. And I have a phenomenal quality of life. I have a husband who is amazing and so supportive, kids that are incredible. So yes, living with this disease really sucks sometimes, a lot of the time. And at the same time, it's doable, and you could live a very great quality of life. And that's what I try to portray in the support group, so that these newbies who are just diagnosed, or young adults who are just petrified that they'll never get married and have children and all of that, I'm an example. You could do it.
You are an example. You're like sunshine shining at me through the screen. Honestly, I want to join your support group right now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get you on the email list.
Just so I can spend more time with you. I feel that way too a little bit, because also married, small children, surgery with small children. I feel like I've gone through that part of it too. And I just want to reiterate what you said. There can be both. It can be frustrating and a hellscape and just the most horrible thing, but there can also be hope and light and, just really good times when it's really bad. So I love that you live that out loud, literally live that out loud. I'm tearing up right now.
Well, I will tell you, it has taken a lot of therapy. Well, not a lot of therapy, but listen, this is a tough disease. I mean, what disease isn't, right? All diseases are tough. There's no doubt. But, I just had a really bad case. And I think once I hit short gut and became TPN dependent and realized that I had this medical trauma from early on, I thought, you know what, this is a time to definitely seek out some help, because I want to continue trying to be that ray of sunshine. And it's hard to do that when you're feeling, pulled down from, you can't recover from surgery, and now this is happening, and I don't want TPN, and I don't want to be, dependent on, and I don't want a Hickman in my chest, and all these things. And by reaching out to an IBD, a mental health professional at the UPMC IBD Center, really did, I won't say it turned me around, because I had the resilience inside me. It just had to come back out. And I was given the tools of how to accept what I didn't want. And when you talked about, both things being true, it really sucks having this illness, and you can have a good quality of life and be okay. That's the dialectic of it, right? Those two truths can exist together. And that's what I learned, through my therapy. And it's been extremely helpful and has brought my resilience back up so that I can do what I do.
I'm going to get back there again one day.
You're going to come to my support group. Yes, you will. Yes, you will.
Lori's support group and my therapist will get me back there.
I think it's just a really lovely thing that you said, though, that I think people need to recognize, is that the resilience is there inside you. I think that's just such a lovely reminder for everybody.
Yeah.
I obviously needed to hear that. Can you tell I'm going through it, Lori? I'm going through it.
Yeah. You know what? Listen, it's hard stuff.
It is. Someone asked me the other day, how do you do the podcast? How do you listen to other people's stories in and out? And so I'm like, sometimes I cry. Sometimes I'm talking to someone and it really hits me hard and I cry. And then I text Alicia afterwards and say, please delete every single thing that I say from the show.
Yeah, but that's okay, right? Because I think, we're human, right? And this is hard stuff. And some days are great and some days are harder. And when you talk to somebody where you can really relate, right? And clearly we're all relating to one another because, we're living it, it strikes a nerve, right? And it just means that we're human, and it's okay. And it's okay. And sometimes those tears need to come out and it makes you feel better after, right? Because we know holding things in, good for us, right? Finding a way to get it out is healthier for us. And you're welcome to my group anytime. Both of you. I'd love to have you.
It's interesting when Robin said, how am I'm sort of living this out in the middle of a podcast, which bless you, Robin, sorry. Some of the things that you've really worked through was when you were leading a support group, which is very similar, where it's like you are the leader of this group and people are looking to you for the temperature of this group and and the culture of the group. How did you balance having that internal struggle and trying to make yourself get to a place where you could go back to recognizing your resilience and building some of these tools while also still providing support to people at the same time? That's really difficult.
Yeah, I think I couldn't run the group if I wasn't in a place to do so, right? So when I had my last surgery, I couldn't run the group, right? I was recovering from surgery. I physically couldn't do it, right? And somebody else in the group, who comes all the time, just stepped in for me. And, she was wonderful, but she was also really happy for me to come back. And I knew, I couldn't come back until I was all together to do so. Right. So I think recognizing that if you need to step away, it's okay. Right. Because you do have to bring your best self. And I think it's also okay to be, I want to be up and bubbly and all that, but I think it's also okay to show your vulnerability at times, right? Because you want the others to relate to you as well. Now, what I don't typically do in the group is my own share, right? I call them shares. Everybody has a chance to share, not because I don't want to, but because I want to give everybody else a chance to speak. And the comments I make to follow up on what people say, I'll give examples of my own situation and things like that. And in my introduction, everybody knows, my story. That's pretty much how I do it, And also I think it could also be, before my last surgery, I had all these gallbladder problems, right? And I was passing stones and it was just horrendous. And, there would be times that I would run the group where I was not feeling 100%. However, I threw myself into it and it was a great distraction, right? It took me out of my head of what I was dealing with at the time and, feeling productive, and I was helping others. So it was also served as a good distraction. But yeah, you have to be up to doing it, right? And I always am because I love it. So it's really, I look very forward to it.
This is the paradox of support groups, though, in some ways, and you will relate to this for sure, but that when people are looking for support groups and they don't see one in their area, that's typically the time they step forward and say, I want to start a support group. But at that moment, the reason they want to start a support group is because they need support.
Right.
They're not in a place where they can provide support in a way that is actually going to be helpful to the community. And I don't say that as some sort of denigration. Yeah. It's just that there are times where you need support. And so that's not the time for you to take on a position where you are taking people to a place where they're finding the support that they need. And I think that's such a struggle because, especially when these people step up and say, I really need a support group and there's not one in my town. And that's the time, they need support and yet they can't get it in that moment. And it's so sad. That's why I'm very grateful that this has happened where we do have virtual support groups where we can refer people to say, okay, great, go talk to this group. They're online, get what you need for a little while, and then come back to me when you're in a place where you're feeling a little more stable. That's why I'm grateful that there are more virtual support options happening that people can access because, I have worked with support groups in the past. And it was one of the hardest things with these different diseases that I would work with people would step forward and say, I want a support group. So I'm going to start a support group. And I'd be like, well, that's a surefire way to have a terrible support group. And because the people showing up are in the same place as you and everybody needs this, so I don't know, I just talked in a circle.
Yeah,
no, you didn't. I actually did that too. I told somebody when I was working with support groups, I was like, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think that you are in a place to offer support to others. And I did not want to offend that person. And she said, you know what? You're probably right. You're probably right.
It's true. And in fact, I had somebody join my support group who was going to start a support group in a different state. So he came to my support group to see, how I did it, just to, be educated a little bit. Wouldn't you know, he kept coming back. to my support group, which I thought was great, he needed the support. It was great. I haven't seen him in a while, so maybe he got his up and running. But yeah, I think it's very true. You really have to be in a place so that it could be productive support. You get what you need too, but you need to be in a place to run it in a way that everybody receives what they need.
So having had Crohn's disease for 43 years, you got your Crohn's disease before there was really any treatment options other than some not great ones and steroids, which are very detrimental. I'm curious what that was like to live through sort of the evolution of these different treatments. And was there a point where you're like, holy cow, this is super exciting? Like, what has been the times where you're like, this is amazing? Because there's been a few, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. I think what's really amazing about having all these medications and being able to watch them all appear and knowing that there's more in the pipeline is that the hope for those that are newly diagnosed to have so many medications to be able to try, right? Now, we know that not all medications work for everybody. And sometimes it's even a struggle, not a struggle, but how do our physicians position the therapy that's right for each patient? Clearly they figure it out, right? But the hope is that the right medication is given to the right patient at the right time and will keep the disease from progressing. And if you keep the disease from progressing, then you won't need surgeries and you'll have more bowel and things like that. So that's the hope. And of course, precision medicine and is really the hope for down the road, right? Just to know the right drug at the right time for the right person. So that's what I think is so exciting. And there is more in the pipeline. So there's so many more tools in the toolbox, and to watch the evolution of it is just incredible. And I'm really grateful. I'm on Stelara, and it's got to be working, because when I had my last surgery, the surgeon, he said, if I didn't know you had Crohn's disease, I wouldn't have known. He said, your bowel looked so good, whatever bowel I have left, all 70 centimeters. But he said, it looks great. I don't hope I didn't jinx myself. So it's good, and I tell that to patients all the time. I said, there's lots of tools in the toolbox now. So, and they're not all going to work for everyone, but there's lots to choose from, which is great.
Well, and one of the things that we talked about is the research that's now happening for the other aspects of care. So not just the medications that are available to treat these diseases, but the research that's going into how do we optimize people to go into surgery, or how do we optimize nutrition for people, these types of things. And so, you had said this last surgery had gone better, than some of your other recovery. And I said, why do you think that is? And you said doing some prehab and being able to get kind of in a better place. Talk a little bit about that, please.
It's really interesting. So as I shared earlier, my very first surgery the recovery was a disaster. I was so very sick. And even the surgeries after that were tougher recoveries. This surgery was an 8+ hour surgery. My gallbladder came out, my liver was biopsied, he did tons of lysis of adhesions. My bowel was kind of like, he had to maneuver it to make a better, he gave me a little resection, then he had to maneuver it to make it more of like a pipe, so things flowed better with peristalsis. So it was over 8 hours. And you would think that would be a really hard recovery. And it was. I'm not going to minimize it. It was a lot of time on the couch and I couldn't move very well. And it was hard to eat after. However, it went quicker. Every little step went faster. And I really believe it's because I was nutritionally optimized, right? My body had all the nutrition it needed because I had been on TPN for over 8 years since the last surgery. And my body had everything it needed. So I was hydrated. I was nutritionally sound. So my body was strong, even though my gallbladder was sick and, I couldn't eat. I hadn't eaten for, oh my gosh, almost 9-10 months because I just couldn't tolerate anything. But I was getting my TPN every night. So I really think that helps. And I also think, trying to be as strong as you can physically, and, you don't have to go run marathons or, lift a jillion pounds a day, but, some form of exercise where your muscles are a little built up is helpful too. There are, and, we talked about it a little bit. And I remember after one of my surgeries that the surgeon gave my husband this study that he worked on about about going for surgery when you're not as sick and the recovery is a little bit better. And it's very, very true. At least in my case, it was.
So typically when people are having surgery, they tell them they can't eat for like a certain amount of time before they go into surgery, just I guess for aspiration purposes. What about TPN? Were you able to do TPN like the night before your surgery because it's not taking something orally?
That's right. Yeah. So remember that TPN bypasses the gut. So anything intravenously bypasses the gut. So yeah, I was on my TPN, no problem. In fact, it was interesting to me. I think anesthesia, if I remember back correctly, I was able to even have like I want to say 12 hours before or something. Like those rules changed a little bit. I'm not sure exactly what the hours were, but I remember it would be like NPO for, at least 24 hours. But I remember them saying you could have tea. I didn't have it because I was scared because I thought that can't be right, but it was. Yeah. So I had my TPN, no problem. And then they kept it going after surgery in the hospital, and they had to increase it because I wasn't eating for a while. And, and now it's decreased a little bit because I seem to be absorbing, which is good.
I had surgery in December of 2020 and July of 2021. And I actually drank like carb heavy beverages the night before. Like they had me basically carb load, like I was training for a race the night before. I think I even had one the morning of. That's what I asked Stacey Collins, friend of the show, because we were going through J-pouch surgery around the same time. I was like, why am I carb loading for surgery? Because it was such a foreign concept to me. But then I read research that said that, having surgery, depending on how long you're in, is like running a marathon or 2 marathons or 3. And I was in surgery, that's first surgery for at least 8 hours, I think it was longer, but it was at least 8 hours. I was in that surgery in December of 2020. So yeah, it was like I did 3 marathons or something comparatively. I don't know. I'm making that up. Don't quote me, anyone. If you find out I'm wrong, don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Yeah. And protein, right? Carbs, protein, your body needs that to heal, Yeah.
Even after I was in ICU, and I was NPO, obviously in ICU, but now there's research that's like, you shouldn't be depriving people of calories when they need it to heal and recover. So,
right. And it's that fine balance of your gut being able to tolerate food, right? It takes a little while for your gut to wake up.
Yeah, but you can do TPN for somebody who's in ICU.
That's exactly right. There's different ways to nourish. That's right.
I'm curious, when you started having issues with your gallbladder, did it take them a little bit longer to figure out it was your gallbladder and not something that was Crohn's related?
Yeah, that is such a great question because, we both couldn't believe it. It was like 2 years before that we really figured it out. And I was getting this like back pain. And I would say to him, listen, I'm getting this back pain. Like, what do you think? And he would do scans and this and that. He's like, I just think it's your stricture that you're just getting referred pain. And I'm like, oh, okay. Makes sense, right? Because it's so easy to blame our Crohn's on everything, right? So that's really what we thought it was. And it would come and it would go. And finally, it ended up that it was the perfect storm. I guess I started passing stones. And I remember I was having a one-on-one Zoom conversation with a patient and offering support and, chatting with her. And I was sitting right here actually. And I was drinking a smoothie. And all of a sudden I was getting tremendous pain, like all over like my back and my stomach. And I was getting nauseous and I was starting to sweat. Like, what is going on here? And she had no idea. Like, I was keeping the conversation going. She was having no idea. And I guess the stone passed and I felt better. And I thought, oh my God, I must have been obstructing. And then about a week later or 2 weeks later, out of nowhere, it was a Saturday night. My husband and I were binging on Netflix before we were going out for dinner. And I got horrendous pain. And it was so bad that I thought I was having a heart attack. And we called the doctor and he's like, you really better go to the ER. and they scanned me and they did blood. And finally, it all came back that it was a gallbladder. So every time previous to that I had symptoms, nothing really showed up. Like my levels weren't elevated enough or nothing showed up in the CAT scan. And they knew my gallbladder had sludge in it. Like we knew it had sludge. So, but it finally decided to form stones just small enough to pass through. And sure enough, the test showed it. Yeah. And when they did the ultrasound, the ultrasound person said to me, "Oh my gosh, you must have 40 plus stones in here." And I'm like, "Oh my God, 40 plus stones." So when I told that to this surgeon, he was howling. He's like, "What, did she count every stone?" That was so funny. But yes, I think you make such a good point that it's so easy to blame everything on our IBD. So, the takeaway is to be open-minded that it's not always the Crohn's and it could be other things.
That is so, how many so's can I say in here? That is so hard to do. Or even if you have that knee jerk, oh God, what is this again? To be able to take a step back and say, okay, what do I really feel like? Is this feeling the same as something that I felt before, or is this something that's new? Because I went through that when my diagnosis changed from ulcerative colitis to Crohn's, because the pain was different. And so I immediately said, this is Crohn's, like in my brain. I don't have ulcerative colitis, I have Crohn's. I mean, it ended up being that way, but the pain was different, and I still went straight to that conclusion that it was, so it's hard to not automatically just blame everything on IBD.
That's right.
I have bad news. I have to ask you the last question. It's time to wrap up. What is the one thing that you want the IBD community to know?
The one thing I want the IBD community to know is that you are not alone, that IBD can be a very lonely and isolating disease. Nobody wants to talk about poop, and surrounding yourself with others who really get it is extremely comforting, empowering, and helpful. And it can really help increase your quality of life. So just know you're not alone.
What's interesting is that makes me tell a very fast story of how opening yourself up to creating these connections can actually be super beneficial, because a past guest of ours gave you a shout out. Tina gave you a shout out in her episode because she was visiting Pittsburgh and you were there, and she happened to need to go to the hospital and ended up needing to have surgery in Pittsburgh where she did not live. And you were so helpful. And I think you guys had never met each other up until that point. Had you? Like, you just communicated over like virtually, right?
So we were Twitter friends, and she had posted something about something she had been experiencing. And I said, I don't know, I kind of think I know what's wrong, kind of thing. And she said, well, I'm coming to Pittsburgh to speak for a conference. And I said, well, let me pick you up at the airport. And we went to the conference because I was attending the conference, and she didn't show up at the conference. I didn't see her anywhere in the morning. So I texted her and I said, where are you? She said, I was in my room obstructing all night long. She said, I'm so sick. So I reached out to the doctor and the whole bit and got her organized and took her to the hospital. And, she's by herself, not in her own hometown. And, I knew the lay of the land. I said, I'm not leaving you alone. And, we went through the ER together, and she's such a trooper. And I got her in her room and they told her she needed surgery. She's like, what? And I surrounded her with all my doctors and we got her better. Yeah. And it's been a beautiful friendship. Yeah. Tina's amazing. And now I want to give a shout out to Tina because she's incredible. The work she does is just incredible. Yeah, love that girl.
It's really lovely that you were able to help her in that moment, because I know it must have been so intimidating, because just like you, she had very carefully built her team around her and has a very complicated case. And so I'm sure she felt much reassured that, she had somebody like you who had very much knew the system and could really help her navigate that. So thank you for doing that. Again, this is the beauty of this community. So thank you so much, Lori. What a joy it is to talk to you. Like Robin said, you're a ray of sunshine. So this was so fun. Thank you everyone also for joining us for the show, and cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for having me. Hi, this is Lori. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share it with your friends. It's an amazing, amazing podcast.